It's time for the Volquest Mailbag Podcast, answering your questions from the General's quarters every week, right here on Volquest.
Good Thursday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com Mailbag Podcast, presented by our good friends at Smoky Mountain Organics. Glad to have you along with us on this Thursday. Don't forget about Smoky Mountain Organics. You can check them out online at SmokyMountainOrganics.com. Visit one of their 4 locations in East Tennessee, including that Knoxville location right across from Trader Joe's on 8018 Kingston Pike, also in Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, and Sevierville as well. East Tennessee's most trusted health and wellness store, focusing on natural products and organic remedies to a variety of ailments. That's Smoky Mountain Organics. All right, guys, let's jump right into this mailbag podcast here. Plenty of questions to get to. It's that time of year. We got a little bit of everything on the docket. We'll start with some current football questions here. And this is from Ball Since 1996. Will there be a youth movement for the next few games to try to get some of the players who haven't played more snaps? Bonus question, do you see Cedric Tillman reaching 1,000 yards at the end of the regular season? Crazy that that's a question, Rob, but when you look at the numbers, it's not unrealistic.
Where is he up already? 800?
He's at 750, so he's got about 250 to go.
I mean, I think if you count the bowl game, almost certainly.
Yeah, I think it depends. Can he get it to can he have another 150 yard game between over the next 2? I just feel like there'll be limited opportunities because I think Tennessee's going to score quicker in these next 2 games. They're going to spread it around, and so I'm going to say he doesn't reach it in the regular season, but does in the bowl game.
I mean, there's a shot. I mean, you look the best 2 teams they played, Georgia and Alabama. He's got 372 yards receiving in those 2 games. I mean, he's getting more productive as the year goes on.
My point being is, unless they keep a lot of those guys on the sidelines because they're trying to redshirt them or whatever, I just feel like if he doesn't get a couple of big plays early and Tennessee gets up 28-0 and he's got 3 catches for 47 yards, they could end up just saying, all right, we're going to not risk anything with Cedric Tillman and some of these guys, and we're going to play some of these younger players.
Yeah, with Javonte Payton being out, and I don't think he's going to play, I'm going to say that Cedric Tillman has a great shot at getting it done in these next 2 games. I see your point, Austin. I just think that's where Hendon Hooker's got his most trust, and I think
I do agree with that.
I think that's where he's going to throw it to. All right, let's talk about youth movement. We talked about it a little bit at receiver. Do you think we're going to see some other guys? I mean, because here's the thing, Rob. If you got a guy who's played in, say, 2 regular season games, I mean, he can play in one of these 2 and still play in a bowl game and still redshirt. So that would be a guy like Dominic Bailey or Bryson Eason or some of those guys. I mean, I think – I don't know that it's a full-blown movement, but I think you might see a couple guys you haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, if you're going to redshirt them, I mean, if that's truly the goal, then there's just not a ton of guys, are there, that you're going to blow it playing at South Alabama. I mean, you play 10 games in a year, and if you've talked with those kids and you have that plan in place, and it's a pretty short list. It certainly does not constitute a youth movement, quote unquote.
Yeah, there's not enough people on the roster for it to be a quote youth movement. Certainly on the defensive side of the ball, they're playing about everybody. There's a handful there that you might see a little bit more from, but I don't know that you'll see a ton of those guys. We mentioned it in the podcast on Tuesday. Maybe you see some young offensive linemen earlier. Just depends on how things go in this game and sort of where it goes from there. But I mean, I don't know that you see a whole lot else at some other positions. All right, let's go to the next one here. Do you see Tennessee starting to get commitments as early signing day inches closer, or do you see signatures just rolling in on early signing day? Do all the current commits plan to sign on the early signing day? Take a guess as to 2 younger players who get a lot of run against South Alabama and Vanderbilt. Prediction for the basketball tournament this week that the Vols are playing in. Rob, we'll go hoops tournament for you first. What do you think about Tennessee with 2 games in Connecticut?
I mean, I think they got a shot, but I'll be honest, I just don't know enough about those other 3 teams right now to feel, like I have a great feel for that field. I watched Villanova play against UCLA most of the game, and I think they're a solid top 10 team with really good guards. UNC, I know, struggled with Charleston earlier this week. So, I don't think they're a juggernaut by any means. And Purdue is not the Purdue team Tennessee. I mean, there's no Carson Edwards on that team. If Tennessee makes shots, I think they not only win this week, they could beat anybody. Like they're shooting around 40% from three.
All right. Guess at a couple of young players who get a lot of run against South Alabama and Vanderbilt. Austin, you got anybody?
I mean, I think what you said. I think Bryson Eason, Dominic Bailey up front. I think Deshaun Rucker. Makes sense in the secondary. I don't want to throw like Kamal Haddon or Turnage in there because I don't consider them the same as what we're talking about here. And then at wide receiver, I don't know if there really is anybody. I mean, does Walker Merrill get any run?
Well, obviously they're going to play Ramel Keaton a lot more because of the injury of Devonta Payton. That's not going to be because of who they're playing. It's the fact that he's got an injury and they've got to have somebody step in, and he's the next guy it appears to be in line.
Sure.
You don't think we'll see some Holiday? Because that's the one that, he's played special teams pretty much every week, hasn't he? I mean, he's not a red shirt.
How many games has Miles Campbell played special teams in how many games?
I don't have the release in front of me. I think I don't know that he's played in 4 at this point.
He would make sense to me.
Yeah, it could. I mean, but you're right on Holiday as well. I mean, I think that you might get a chance to look at him and see where he's at, and maybe Walker Merrill, a couple of those guys there potentially if things are going well for Tennessee. All the current commits plan to sign on early signing day. I think anybody committed right now is wanting to do that. Austin.
Yeah.
And you see Tennessee's going to get some stuff done here before the early signing day. It's not like they're going to roll in and get 10 new guys on early signing day. They're gonna make some commitment noise between now and the signing date in December, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'd be shocked if Tennessee doesn't have a commit or two before the calendar turns to December.
Okay.
I mean,
AP with Justin Williams decommitting, is that just a matter of time now? Is that directly correlated to his Tennessee visit?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's 100% correlated to that. I mean, I said Saturday night that I thought Tennessee's the leader.
He's got to come back, doesn't he? Doesn't he have to make a couple of trips before I don't think he's going to decommit and immediately flip to somewhere in the coming days.
Yeah, he's not going to do anything until he'll officially visit here December 11th, that last weekend. He's not going to do anything before then. So I mean, anybody that's expecting him just to hop in the boat, that's probably not going to happen. He's going to officially visit December 11th. I think there's a chance he makes it back up here unofficially Saturday.
All right, CD Vol, is Tennessee playing catch up to Auburn on the JUCO defensive backs in Gilbert and Scott?
Yeah, I memean, they're battling with those schools or with Auburn. Yeah, I mean, I think Tennessee's in a better shot with Gilbert than they are Scott. Scott's a West Coast kid. I'm not saying he won't come to Auburn or come to Tennessee or Miami, but Oregon makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways just because he's from out that way. I don't see him going to BYU. Gilbert feels like they're in a better spot with him. And then you've got other players in the JUCO ranks, like a guy like Michael Caraway at Pearl River Community College in Mississippi, that Tennessee's taking a hard look at as well.
Yeah, I think you'll see some JUCO names continue to pop up as Tennessee continues to evaluate in that world as well. All right, this is from Can't Get Right 8402. Who would you consider our most important commit currently? Who's the most important target currently?
Well, I mean, most important commit, I mean, I would go Taven Jackson. Anytime you get quarterbacks, man. I mean, quarterbacks are always going to be your most important commits because quarterback drives the train. It's a line of scrimmage league, and linemen are a close second. But if you're not good at quarterback, you're not going to be any good. So, I go with Taven Jackson. And then, what do they do? If they have exodus from that room, if Joe decides to leave, you've got to bring in another body. If Hendon were to leave, that changes how you handle things dramatically, in my opinion. So yeah, I'll go with that. What was the other question?
Who's the most important guy on the board?
That's a good question. I'll go pass rushers. I think, Joshua Josephs, James Pierce, guys that can get to the quarterback. I think that's important. I mean, how many times in the last couple of weeks, Brand, Tennessee secondary, which admittedly is not the fastest group out there, have they been able to hold up a decent amount of time? And Tennessee just can't get home, and without bringing significant blitzes.
I'm sorry, if you go ahead.
Go ahead, I'm done.
I was just on the Milton. He's got to go down, right? Is that the rule?
Yeah, that's right. If he left, he would have to go down. Or if he grad transferred. If he can grad transfer, like
But didn't he grad transfer from Michigan? Wasn't he a graduate? Didn't he graduate early from Michigan?
That's what I thought.
No, maybe he did. I guess you're right.
So he would have to be, and he's not going to have his graduate degree, I don't think, in a year's time at Tennessee. So I think he would probably have to transfer down because he's already grad transferred. But I don't know that for sure because I don't know what that rule. I don't know what that rule is.
Tennessee had so many new kids come in, Hubs, and then the one-time transfer passed, and it all kind of happened at one time. So it's all a melting pot for me.
It is. I'm with you 100%. That's I said that. I could be wrong, but I think I'm right on that.
No, I think you're right about that. But it all happened in one fell swoop where like things were overlapping and interlocking, and
he could probably take a chance and try to get a waiver, right?
Yeah, I'm sure he could. I'm sure he could try to do that as well. And who knows how that process is going to work with the ever evolving, ever changing NFL or NCAA. Assuming he wants to leave, and I think that'll depend a lot on what the rest of that room looks like as well.
Before we go any further, how great of a reclamation project would it be for Heupel if he took Joe Milton and actually made him functional? Well, after you've seen him this year with all the overthrows and stuff, if a year from now, if Hendon Hooker left and Joe Milton was the guy and played well, would it be a surprise to you? Yes or no?
Surprise, not a shock.
Yeah, surprise, but not a shock. I'm telling you, I mean, and I know the game was over, and maybe that's why. Maybe he wasn't geeked up or whatever. But I mean, what he did at the end of the Georgia game is what everybody thought you would see out of him this year. I mean, a guy who could hit the deep ball and then impale a ball into Cedric Tillman's chest at the goal line on a slant. I mean, he threw the ball, but he was not all geeked up overthrowing it. I thought that was by far the best he looked. Now, I'm not putting a whole lot of stock into that because it's the end of the game, whatever. There were still some Georgia starters on the field, though, and he looked like a guy who had more command and more control of things than he did early in the year. And again, I think part of that's because game was over and he was pretty relaxed.
You heard it here first. Milton Heisman 2022.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's right, AP. All right, Brandon _SV wants to know, hypothetically speaking, Jimbo leaves A&M 5 days before signing day. Where does Walter Nolan sign? LSU? I don't know. I mean,
I don't know, man. That's a great question. I mean, he's super connected to a lot of those kids at A&M.
It might still be at A&M. Who knows
maybe,
what happens?
Again, the only thing for sure about Walter Nolan is for sure, I'm never going to close the door on anything one way or the other until that kid puts pen to paper.
Yep, that's for sure. Second question he's got, assuming all starters are healthy, which of these former players would start for this team? You ready? Nick Rivez, Raquez Crump, Dylan Bates, Denarius Moore, Rajon Neal, Prentice Wagner, Brent Brewer.
Well, Denarius Moore would start in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I would say the two most likely out of that crew that would start are the three most likely: Rajon Neal, Denarius Moore, Nick Rivez. I don't know about the rest, but those three I think would have a great shot at being a starter.
You think Rajon wouldn't start over Tyon when healthy? Do you think?
Well, he wouldn't now that he's got his LASIK eye surgery.
That's terrible.
If you've heard that ad on the Nation.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, but the fact of the matter is Tyon Evans has not been healthy, and we've not seen him healthy. So I'm going to bank on him not being healthy. And so I'm going to say, yes, Rajon Neal would be the starter.
Wasn't Rajon a 1,000-yard rusher here?
He was.
Yeah, he was.
Most unheralded 1,000-yard rusher in program history. Perhaps.
And that was when he couldn't see. Think about if he could see.
No, he's terrible.
See now.
You're terrible. He could see. He's had some LASIK surgery, and he's telling everybody.
You can see better now, though.
You can see better. All right, let's get on with that before you get us all in trouble. With Heupel and staff looking like a good hire to this point, is this Tennessee's best shot to move back into prominence in the SEC, considering the Mullen at Florida mess, We seem to be a clear notch above or two above teams we should be beating, and we just seem to have Kentucky's number. Is this Tennessee's best shot?
No, because the best shot was clearly the Butch Jones era when Georgia was down and Florida was down, and they didn't get to Atlanta. Now, I mean, if they get to Atlanta now, they're a playoff team, in so many ways. That's where Tennessee is. If they can ever get back to Atlanta, they're a legitimate playoff team.
Yep.
I just think it's harder now because of where Georgia's at, because you're right. They weren't there. I mean, they're the game changer in the East that wasn't there 5 years ago.
They've got to get to the pod system, and I know that means you're going to have to beat an Alabama probably or something like that. But I just feel like you got to get to where like you beat one team, and then you don't have this. I mean, you're in the SEC, you're going to play a murder show schedule anyway. But the fact they play the two best teams in this league every year is really, really difficult.
Yep. I will say this. All right. It's easier to get to number 3 right now than it has been in a long time because of Florida, LSU, Auburn's they're not really a mess like Florida is, but they certainly don't have it rolling.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think the number 3 spot is up for grabs behind Alabama and Georgia. A&M's in that mix. Certainly, we'll see what LSU looks like with a new coach. We'll see where Josh Heupel can take Tennessee.
And how long is A&M willing to be patient with Jimbo? I mean, I know they give him this $100 million deal in 10 years and all that stuff, but if you can't get past Alabama and you can't get to Atlanta, what does it matter? I mean, the last conference title they had was the last Tennessee won a conference title. That's 1998.
Yeah, the interesting thing about them, I mean, if you're Texas A&M and you're getting ready to spend $250 million more on facility stuff they're committed to and all those things out there, we talk about Butch Jones, beating Florida and Georgia and not getting to the SEC championship game. I mean, think about where Texas A&M is right now, Rob. I mean, you're sitting there, LSU's a train wreck. They're not even going to be bowl eligible. You beat Alabama head-to-head, and you lost to Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss to make you non-relevant in terms of getting to the SEC West.
I hadn't really thought about that, but that's nuts.
It is. I mean,
that's not quite like beating Georgia and Florida and staying home the first week of December, but it's close.
It is pretty close. That's for sure. That is for sure. All right, next one we have. If Lincoln Riley, here we go. If Lincoln Riley were to leave, would Heupel entertain OU if they came calling? Has he ever stated it's his dream job? Do you get the sense he and his family like it here and they like the area? I do get the sense that his family likes it here. I think they're very comfortable here. I mean, the guy played at Oklahoma. I don't know that Lincoln Riley is going anywhere, and I don't know that Oklahoma's calling Josh Heupel if there was an opening. But I do know this. I think his family does certainly like it in East Tennessee, and I think they seem very comfortable here, and they like the direction. Josh likes the direction he's got things going with this program.
And Hubbard, don't you think it's also huge in that business that he likes and trusts the guy he works for, his boss?
Yep, and it's not just his boss. I mean, it's not just Danny White. I think it's also the administration at Tennessee. I mean, they've been very accommodating to him. He talked about it on Wednesday night on Ball Calls. I mean, they did not tell him it would take a year to get everything moved around so he could practice in the mornings. I mean, that was done. I practice in the mornings. Okay, we'll get everything done, schedule-wise for classes and all those things. It's done. It's taken care of. They've been very committed to anything that he needs, not just from Danny White's standpoint, but the administration standpoint.
And we love him for it. We love those morning practices.
We do. I'm not sure the players like it when it's 25 degrees outside and they've got to go out there and get going. But
they can toughen up. We don't have to go to the practices anymore, and we like those noon practice conferences, which allows me to go watch my kids play basketball at night.
AP, I'd feel better if he bought a house.
He got a chuckle out of that one when I told him that story tonight about the fact that he was unhappy because he was renting here, and he just laughed and said, "Well, and we're not going to rent and stay in this house much longer. As soon as we get the house we bought done with our renovations, we're moving." And I think they're ready to do that as quick as they can. All right. To E. Schaefer 92, do Perry and Herring project as inside linebackers or edge guys? If Tolan is to flip, where does he project? If they're not outside guys, where do they turn?
They are Herring and Perry are inside guys. Tolan is not the same position as like Joshua Josephs is a Leo. Same thing with James Pierce. Tolan's more inside that can play outside than he is just full fledged inside.
Okay. Which job do you think is better, an SEC, Oklahoma, or Tennessee? I guess this is going back to this guy's circling back around to the, hey, what if Oklahoma calls Josh Heupel? I guess that's why he's asking that question.
See, like because the way Lane exited, this just, I mean, it's natural. Your natural reaction as a Vol fan is, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong, and so you get a little chatter out there about Lincoln Riley and LSU. I mean, no offense, I think Lincoln Riley, what's he done? Like he took advantage of the Big 12. I mean, which is weak. He made it to the playoff. They blew that game to Georgia. Didn't make it to the title game. He's got run out of the gym anytime he plays anybody worth anything. I mean, I think he's coached some Heisman Trophy winners. That's great. But I think he's a great offensive mind. Don't get me wrong. But I mean, it's not like, would you rather have Jimbo or Lincoln Riley?
I mean, did you really just say what's Lincoln Riley done? How many times has he been in the playoffs?
In the weak Big 12.
And he's got 3 guys starting on Sundays that played quarterback for him, and 2 more Heisman trophies in this whole entire university has in its history.
Oh, no, he's coached Heisman Trophy winners.
Well, those are the things he's done.
Which job's better job?
I would take when it's current form. I don't know. That's a good question. Oklahoma's won a lot more games than Tennessee has in the last decade, but they've not been in this league.
And man, I wasn't that impressed with it when we went out there. Were you guys? I was underwhelmed by just the facilities and the inside the stadium. It was not what I expected for a program that's got that kind of tradition.
Yeah, I mean, I think
it was solid.
Yeah,
but it wasn't Alabama.
No, it wasn't elite.
Or Georgia or Tennessee. You're just talking about the pregame and walking to the stadium and all that.
Oh no, it wasn't even A&M. I think A&M's.
Oh, I think that's
A&M's tailgate situation was spectacular.
I agree.
Yeah, it's
But I mean, recruiting wise, it's a little like Tennessee. I mean, you got to recruit out of state, but they have such a deep history of pillaging in North Texas, and then I don't know that. I mean, Tennessee certainly pulled a lot of players out of Georgia over the years, but not like Oklahoma does Texas. And this is something I didn't realize this. Rick Barnes told me this. Norman, Oklahoma is closer to Dallas than Austin, Texas is.
Yes, that's right. I made that drive.
That's crazy.
That's how big Texas is.
All right, let's go to Bud Wrigley. Rob, I know we signed Edwards for next year, but in the waters this program's been swimming on, it almost feels like this was a missed year in recruiting. With the loss of Folke, Chandler, and any other departures, how's Coach Barnes going to try and make sure this program doesn't take a step back?
Transfer portal, international guys. And yeah, it was a miss in recruiting. When you look at the kids that they had on campus in June and didn't close on, you got Kassan Wallace here twice. It was, a top 10 guy. Brandon Miller's an in-state guy that's a top 15 national player. You couldn't get him back on campus, lost him to Alabama. Yeah, it was a step back. And I said this before. I think the biggest result of that was Tennessee lost 2 guys who were really good recruiters, who had a track record of building relationships with kids. And, this hasn't been a program where, the staff offers a kid that they like in June and they pull him in November. I mean, all those 5-stars we're talking about, Tennessee have been recruited for multiple years, every single one of them.
By the way, hats off to Kim English. Big win over Maryland for his undefeated George Mason team, taking place tonight. All right, or taking place on Wednesday night. Nashville 615. Give me a reason to hope. This year's been great. We're at least winning the games we're supposed to win. However, it's a clear talent gap between Tennessee, Florida, and Alabama, and Georgia, obviously. Recruiting isn't going well. There's no way to sugarcoat that. What makes you think this roster will be better in year 2, 3, or beyond? Is 7-5 the ceiling? There's some pretty solid talent on the roster now, even with 30-plus transfers. With Butch and Pruitt, a new coach provided a jolt in recruiting. That's not happening. Is the game plan to rely heavily on the transfer portal going forward? Let me say this, and everybody can jump in here. I want to say this about the recruiting thing. One, Butch Jones got a little help because he had some legacy guys in state that got the in-state thing going. I think the other thing too is when particularly when Butch Jones got here, there was no early signing date, so you had a little more time. I mean, so many guys are off the board in June. Josh Heupel had been here 4 months, and you're in the middle of an investigation where everybody says you might get the death penalty or you're going to get multi-year bowl ban type deals, and kids are coming off the board. I mean, you look at the recruiting board right now, Austin, it's not deep. I mean, there's not a ton of names on it because so many guys are off the board. They come off so early.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, people on the board are always like, how do people really believe that they're going to get the death penalty? Because parents don't know, recruits don't know. If you've got one school who's not under investigation telling you one thing, and one school that's under investigation telling you something different, which one you probably go believe? The one that's not under investigation.
Even if you don't believe it, you just don't.
It just creates
uncertainty.
Doubt. Yeah,
uncertainty with Tennessee, and there's not uncertainty with school X, Y, and Z.
It's 100% correct. Now, 7-5 is not the ceiling. I mean, here's the thing: 7-5 this year. I think Josh Heupel was probably lucky he didn't win the Ole Miss or Pitt game because then it would create false narrative heading into next year. You've got to replace some key guys, and that don't even count the guys that could potentially leave, like Hendon Hooker, Cedric Tillman, those type players. You need to hold on to those guys, get them to come back. That's when this program continues the upward arc. But if let's say a year from now, Tennessee wins at LSU because they're in first year of a new head coach. Let's say they beat Pittsburgh and then they win all the other games they're supposed to, and they go 9-3, but they lose again to Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. To me, that's a success because, again, you're continuing to take steps. Like, everybody just wants them to hurdle the big three. Like, that, to me, that's never going to just be like blink your, this isn't I Dream of Jeannie, Hub. They ain't just doing blinking on your nose.
No guarantee you catch them.
Correct.
Hurdle them. I mean, that's just the reality of where it's now. Again, the conference is going to change, pods and all those things change the schedule, which could be beneficial to Tennessee. But I mean, there's no guarantee that you catch those guys, because I can promise you Georgia's not taking a step backwards.
And Alabama, I mean, they're on the best run of any program over the last decade in the history of college football.
Yeah, and I'll say this too. I may be wrong. I think of all the jobs that are open out there, you can turn around LSU faster than anybody else because I think there's talent on that roster.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that is a more talented roster that. I mean, you're talking about underachieving. They're grossly underachieving with the talent that's running around on that roster.
Let's go back to what he also said in this question, Hubs. He said what? Now, he said, read it again. Like, he said, there's talent here, right? What'd he say? Even though he said there's some pretty solid talent still on the roster now, even with the 30+ transfers. I think there's okay talent. I think they've won with smoke and mirrors this year in a lot of ways. Like, there's no depth. There's no talent depth, in my opinion. Maybe at a couple positions there's some depth of talent, but I think on the whole there's no depth among the roster. I think you've got to have a couple more classes to get depth on the roster. Like, everybody thinks D-back. I mean, D-back because he's 6'5" and he looks great, but he doesn't play for a reason. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, everybody, and I think all of us are guilty of this in some regard, get caught up in looking at their star rankings coming out of high school, but that doesn't always translate to player in college.
No, and it never will. But, I mean, when you're not winning, that's what you're hanging your hat on.
Sure.
That's what every fan's hanging their hat on is, hey, help's on the way when you're not winning. I mean, so suddenly those guys take on greater importance, right? I mean, you've talked about it. I mean, the worst thing that happened to Harrison Bailey was the 5th star because it created unrealistic expectations there. If Hendon Hooker were to leave, I mean, Taven Jackson's a 4-star midterm enrollee, right? So they're going to hand him the ball and he's going to run with it, and everything's going to be great because that's what the belief and the perception of it gets created with the ranking stuff that's out there. I'm not knocking the ranking stuff. That's just a byproduct of it. Yeah. And there's been enough rankings that have been right where guys have made impacts. I know what Cade said on Tennessee Prime about, It's not normal for freshmen to be playing, particularly at his position. But there's been enough of them out there that have played as freshmen and succeeded that generates the hope that everybody can do that. And that's kind of where things are, particularly when your program is down on its luck and is trying to turn its fortunes around. All right, a couple more to get to as we get out the gate here. C. Troutman, 1 over and under 1.5 assistant coaching changes for this offseason. And do you think we'll have more players surprise us by foregoing the NFL draft for one more year at UT, or will more players surprise us by foregoing their last season at UT to enter the NFL draft? He's obviously talking about Hendon Hooker. I don't know what Hendon Hooker is going to do. I think it's going to be, what does the NFL say about him? Rob, you make the best point on Hendon Hooker that I don't think is getting talked about enough. Hendon Hooker is going to be 24 years old in January or the first of the year. I mean, that's significant when you talk about starting your NFL clock.
Yeah. And I think it's not the same as a guy who's a 21-year-old junior.
Yeah.
To me. And I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
I think somebody in Hooker's situation is more likely to leave if they're told they have a 5th round grade than that 21-year-old junior is.
All right, Austin, over and under on assistant and a half changing after this offseason. I'm taking the under. Taking the under. I think
I'm not sure anybody's leaving.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's leaving.
Yeah.
And now again, the caveat to that is does somebody come and hire Alex Golesh to call plays? Like, again, Alex Golesh, he wants to call the plays. I mean, Hype calls the plays. Golesh is involved in the play calling, but Hype calls the plays. If somebody's willing to come and say, hey, you're now going to be the guy that calls them here. I mean, you would think he would have to listen to that.
Yeah, I'm sure anybody.
But I think everybody's coming back.
Yeah, I do too.
As of now.
But again, you never know what the domino effect is with people getting jobs out there. But I don't think anybody's looking to leave. Now, if an opportunity came about where you can advance your career, that's a total different deal. But right now, I don't see anybody looking for a place, to get out of here as quick as they can. All right, last question. What's everyone's assessment of the job that Danny White has done so far? Can you go into some detail? I know we were all quite proud of what Heupel has accomplished so far with such limitations. So what is a rational idea of what to expect going forward, assuming recruiting, transfer portal pickups go marginally well? I think we just talked about what their expectations are, where they could be a year from now in the previous question. But for Danny White, what's your assessment of Danny White at this point?
You spent more time with him than anybody. What's your assessment?
I think he has done a really good job of listening, much more than I thought, that given the reputation that he came in with. I think he has spent much more time listening and learning and trying to figure out what things are important to people and what things are not. Obviously, they're trying to raise as much money as they can. He's going to build buildings. That I think there's no question that he's all about building facilities and benefit. But little things like the Vol sign thing, that's listening. Okay, that's paying attention to what somebody tells you. And obviously, he took a pretty good stand, Austin, by saying, "Hey, we're not doing the bowl ban. We're just not doing that." And I think I think he drew a pretty good line in the sand there, which I think a lot of people respect the leadership of that and him doing that from a leadership standpoint.
Well, you know as well as I do, Tennessee fans are going to gravitate to anyone who has their back. And for all the kind of, the notions coming in, he's had Tennessee's, the fans, the program, the university's back from the moment he got here. So I think, taking a stand against the bowl ban for the kids, for the fans, all that is something that won over a lot of people. And you're right. I mean, listen, you're doing all the renovations of the stadium. It's just an easy thing to add those 4 letters back up there, and it does a lot of goodwill. I mean, it's just, again, it's not hard. It is not hard to have good PR. And, even though sometimes people make it hard, and, he's done a really good job of listening. You're right. Sitting back and just taking it all in, instead of coming in and trying to change 400 things, to make it, put his thumbprint and fingerprint and signature on everything. He's just sitting back listening and saying, hey, this would work here. Why not use this here?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that there's some people not happy with the ticket stuff, with the changing of that policy and
that needed to happen though. It really did. Somebody had to.
Are you? I didn't mean to interrupt you. Are you still amazed when you hear the figure that Tennessee's net profit on basketball donations is $300,000 a year?
Yeah, that's crazy.
That is a crazy number.
I mean, somebody was going to have to step up on the ticket deal and pull a Doug Dickey and say, put the ugly on me, because that was just an untenable situation when you're in the arms race that this league has become in terms of, fundraising, revenue needs, and the kind of infrastructure you have to have in place in your department.
Yeah. So there's some thoughts on Danny White. There's some thoughts on recruiting, some thoughts on basketball, thoughts on football as well, as Tennessee gets ready to take on South Alabama on Saturday and a chance to get bowl eligible. The basketball team with a couple of big opportunity games coming up in Connecticut this weekend as well. We'll have it all covered for you at Volquest.com. That's going to do it for this edition of the Smoky Mountain Organics Volquest Mailbag Podcast. For Rob Lewis and Austin Price, I'm Brett Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Thursday, everybody.
You've been listening to the Volquest Mailbag Podcast every week right here on Volquest.